The morning came into Carmen's house the way mornings come into spaces that have been crying in them the night before. Quieter than usual. More careful. The light through the curtains doing its work without announcing itself, as if it understood that the person it was waking had already been through enough and didn't need the day making demands before she was ready to receive them. Carmen opened her eyes. The dried tears on her face were the first thing she felt. The specific tight pull of skin that had been wet and had dried without being cleaned, the evidence of the night written on her face in the particular language of salt and grief. She lay still for a moment and let the ceiling be the ceiling and the room be the room and the morning be the morning without trying to make any of it into something else. Then it hit her, the same way it had hit her the morning before, in the same bed, reaching across the same space. The absence. The specific physical fact of being alone in a bed that had recently held two people and now held one. She sat up, stretched, then got up and walked to the kitchen. The note was the first thing she saw, still on the table where she had left it the night before, after reading it twice and finding the $100 bill on the floor and putting the groceries away and going out and coming home and sitting on the porch until the anticipation became worry and the worry became something she couldn't name. The note was still there. She didn't pick it up. Just looked at it for a moment the way you look at something that has already told you everything it has to tell you and has nothing new to offer but is still there because you haven't yet decided what to do with it. Then she opened the refrigerator. She stood in front of it for a moment. It was full. For the first time since she had moved into this house, the refrigerator was full in the specific way of a refrigerator that someone had thought carefully about stocking, rather than just filling with whatever was available. Meat, vegetables. The particular organized abundance of a person who had been in that basement and had thought about what another person needed rather than what was easiest to grab. She closed the refrigerator, walked to the front room and sat down on the couch and looked out the window at the apartment across the street. The curtains drawn the same way they had been drawn since the first day she noticed them. The building quiet, in the way it was always quiet. No movement. No suggestion of anyone inside. She sat with it. She let herself remember. The first time she had noticed him through that curtain gap, the way he had pulled back when she caught him looking, and she had smiled because being noticed had not felt like surveillance, but like something else entirely. The first time he had come across the street to help with the car, the way he had known exactly what to do without making a production of knowing. The laughter at the window. The first kiss arriving without announcement in the middle of something one of them was saying. The night. She let herself remember all of it without trying to organize it into a conclusion yet. Then she glanced at the floor. There, near the window, was the notebook. She looked at it for a moment. She had assumed he had taken it with him, had been certain of it. The notebook that was always nearby, always within reach. The notebook she had found on her first visit to his apartment, opened to a page with her own face drawn on it in careful pencil. She picked it up, carried it back to the bedroom, and lay on the bed and opened it. The drawings were all there. Every one of them. Her face from multiple angles, each version slightly different from the last, each one the record of a specific attempt to get something right that the previous attempt had almost but not quite achieved. Her smile. The specific way her eyes looked in the afternoon light through the window of her house on that first afternoon. Her carrying clothing down the front steps. Her at the floor of her own living room, with a glass of water beside her. She turned through them slowly, spending time with each one, not analyzing, just looking, the way you look at something that tells you how someone saw you, which is always different from, and more surprising than how you saw yourself. She found the blank pages after the drawings, turned through them one at a time, expecting more blankness, finding it page after page. Then something in the middle of the notebook stopped her. A faded heart shape, drawn not with the precise attention he had applied to her face and eyes, but with something more hurried, more private, the kind of mark you make when you're drawing for yourself rather than for any eye that might find it. And inside the heart, in small, careful letters that were slightly different from the handwriting of his name at the bottom of the note on her kitchen table. Angela was here. Carmen looked at it for a long moment. Then she closed the notebook. She sat on the edge of the bed with the notebook in her lap and thought about the name. Angela. She had not heard that name from Terrell at any point across all the time they had spent together, had not heard him mention it in passing, had not seen it written anywhere, had not been introduced to anyone by that name. And yet here it was, inside the notebook, inside a heart, the kind of mark that a person makes when they are keeping something rather than sharing it. Something inside Carmen shifted, not the despairing shift of the night before, the familiar territory of having been left. Something different, something with determination in it, the specific deep-seated variety of determination that a woman develops when she has been through enough difficult things to know the difference between a man who left because he wanted to and a man who left because something else required it. Why would Terrell disappear, but first make sure she had a bag of food? She sat with that thought. Men who leave to be gone don't stock your refrigerator before they go. Men who leave to be gone don't leave money and a note telling you to do something nice for yourself. Men who leave to be gone don't come back across the street at 2:45 in the morning to set groceries on your porch before getting into a car. Something happened. She was certain of it in the specific way that certainty arrives when the body knows something the mind hasn't finished reasoning its way to yet. She stood up, walked to the front door with the specific forward energy of a woman who has made a decision and is acting on it before the doubting part of her has time to catch up and complicate things. She picked up the notebook from where she'd been holding it, looked at it for a moment, then set it back down on the floor near the window where she had found it. She closed her door behind her and stepped out onto the sidewalk and looked both ways with the focused attention of someone searching for something specific without yet knowing exactly what. The street offered its morning self. Quiet. The specific residential quiet of a block doing what blocks do between the time the first people leave for work and the time the neighborhood fully wakes up. Then an older woman stepped out onto her porch across the way and a few houses down. She moved with the deliberate, careful pace of someone who had been moving at their own pace for long enough that they had stopped apologizing for it. She settled herself onto the front steps with the specific, comfortable authority of a woman in her own domain and produced a bag of sunflower seeds from somewhere about her person and began the particular meditative business of working through them. Carmen started toward her. As she crossed the street, she noticed the woman with the dog coming from the other direction, moving along the sidewalk with the small dog on its leash, the same woman she had seen at various hours over the past several days. They passed each other on the sidewalk without speaking, each moving in her own direction, and Carmen continued toward the older woman on the steps. She approached and introduced herself. The woman looked up at her with the patient expression of someone who had heard many things in her life and had learned to wait until the full thing had been said before deciding what to do with it. "I need for you to come a little closer," the woman said. "My ears aren't what they used to be." Carmen walked to the bottom of the steps. She introduced herself again. "Hi," the woman said. "My name is Loretta Mabel, but everyone calls me Lo." "Well, Lo," Carmen said, "did you happen to see the young man I've been spending time with? He lives in that apartment across the street." Lo looked at Carmen with the specific, careful assessment of a woman who has been asked a question she has been asked versions of before and has developed a considered policy about how to answer it. "I step out on my porch every morning," Lo said. "I sit out here until evening most days." She paused. "I see everything that happens on the street." "So you possibly saw who I'm talking about?" Carmen asked. "I did," Lo said. She worked a sunflower seed between her teeth with the unhurried patience of someone who understood that what she was about to say needed to be approached at the right pace, or it would lose something essential in the delivery. "I don't want to get involved with anything messy. I promised myself I wouldn't, because of a situation that happened when I first moved into this house." "I promise you it's nothing messy," Carmen said. Lo looked at her for a long moment, the specific assessment of an older woman reading a younger one. Then she said, "I could tell by the way that young man looked at you that he would be good for you and to you." She paused. "Last night, a ghost stopped by." Carmen looked at her. "A ghost? I haven't seen this ghost in quite some time," Lo said. "Long enough that when I saw him, it was like seeing something I had stopped believing still existed." She set the bag of sunflower seeds beside her on the step. "When I first moved into this house, there were so many people on this block. People used to come outside and talk and barbecue, and the streets would be filled with laughter from the children. You could stand right here on this porch and feel the life of a neighborhood that knew it was alive." Carmen listened. "One day, a young black girl moved onto this block. Angela." Lo said the name with the specific weight of someone saying a name they have said many times in their own private thinking and rarely out loud to anyone. At first, she was very reserved, kept to herself, but we warmed up to her the way neighbors warm up to someone who is worth warming up to, and she began opening up. She was something, the kind of person that a whole block feels better for having on it. She paused. "There was an older man who used to visit her. He would be yelling at her sometimes because she was outside with us. I never understood it at the time. I understand it better now." She looked at the street. One day the older gentleman visited her, and when he drove off, another vehicle pulled up and approached her door and knocked. The morning was very quiet around them. When she opened the door, Lo said, the entire block heard 5 loud popping sounds. Carmen stood at the bottom of the steps and did not move. "I turned and looked toward the sound," Lo said. "I caught a glimpse of a man running toward his truck. The older gentleman hadn't gotten far down the street when it happened. He turned around and came back." She looked at her hands. By the time he got back through that door, Angela was already gone. The street continued its morning business around the two of them. A car passing at the far end of the block. A door somewhere closing. The ordinary sounds of the world that does not pause for the weight of what is being said on a front step between two women who have just met. Carmen stood at the bottom of those steps and thought about the faded heart in the notebook. Angela was here. Lo picked up her sunflower seeds again. "The ghost I saw last night," she said quietly. "That was the older gentleman, coming back after all this time." She looked at Carmen. "Whatever your young man got himself into, he's in the company of someone who once came back for someone who needed him, even when it was too late." She paused. "That tells you something about a person." Carmen stood there for a moment longer. Then she said, "Thank you, Lo." Lo nodded once, returned to her sunflower seeds with the specific settled patience of a woman who had said what needed saying and was content to let it do its work without further assistance. Across the city, further out than Carmen's street, and in the opposite direction from anything familiar, Joshua woke up in the 3rd safe house. The ceiling was unfamiliar. The specific quality of the light through the curtains was unfamiliar. The sounds of the house settling around him were unfamiliar in the particular way of a structure that had been built in a different decade and had developed its own relationship with mourning that was nothing like the relationships the previous safe houses had developed with it. He lay still for a moment. Then he sat up and looked around the room and let the unfamiliarity assemble itself into the specific fact of where he was and why. He got up, walked through the house with the particular navigation of someone learning a space for the first time, running his hand along walls, noting the doors and what they led to, the windows and what they looked out onto. He reached the back door and opened it, and then immediately remembered what Reeves had said about the garage and the daylight and the specific importance of the house appearing abandoned to anyone who might be watching from the outside. He closed the door. He had not thought about food yet, had not thought about the VHS tapes yet, had not thought about the Nintendo or the Atari or any of the specific provisions that Reeves had arranged in this house with the same careful forward thinking he had applied to every other safe house he had ever built. He had thought about Carmen, specifically and continuously since opening his eyes, the specific way she had been sleeping when he left. The note on the kitchen table. the $100 bill on the floor by the table leg, the paper bag of groceries on the porch. Whether she had found them yet, whether she had read the note and understood what it was trying to say across the distance between what he could say and what he couldn't. He walked to the room with the 2 recliners, stood in front of the wall of VHS tapes, and looked at them without seeing them. Then something else entered his attention. Something coming from the television in the corner that he had turned on when he first entered the room, more for the company of its sound than for any interest in what it was showing. A date. On the small screen in the corner, between the programming and whatever was scheduled next, the date sat in the corner of the screen, in the specific matter-of-fact way that televisions displayed dates when they were doing nothing more significant than existing. February the 6th. Joshua looked at it. He thought about what February the 6th meant. Then he remembered what February the 6th meant, and the remembering had the specific quality of something that had been true every year of his life, and had rarely been the occasion for anything that resembled celebration. It was his birthday. He stood in front of the wall of VHS tapes on his birthday in a house he had been in for less than 12 hours, and thought about where he had been on previous birthdays. The hospitals. The foster care arrangement that had lasted until it didn't. The streets. The abandoned buildings with mattresses on the floor where the man delivered food and artwork assignments and nobody asked questions. The various configurations of survival that had filled the spaces between one February 6th and the next. He had never had a birthday he actually enjoyed. He had never had a birthday that felt like something worth noting beyond the specific administrative fact of another year having passed. This birthday, he had hoped, was going to be different. He had not said this to Carmen. Had not mentioned it, because the mentioning of it would have required explanation, and the explanation would have opened doors he wasn't ready to open yet. But he had thought about it. Had thought about what it might be like to spend a birthday in the company of someone who looked at him the way Carmen looked at him. Had held that thought quietly in the specific way that people hold good things they are not yet certain they have the right to want. He sat down in one of the recliners, reached for the VHS tape sitting closest to the floor, the one that was positioned as if it had been selected specifically by whoever had set this room up to be the first one a person would reach for. He put it in the VCR, sat back in the recliner. The movie started. He did not watch it. He sat in the recliner with his eyes pointed in the direction of the television and thought about Carmen waking up this morning. About what she had found, about whether the note had done what it was meant to do, or whether it had landed in the specific way that things land when the person receiving them doesn't have the full picture and therefore cannot read them correctly. He thought about her hair, the new hair she had gotten the day before, the morning she had gone to the salon with his money, the money that had come from an envelope he had found on a shelf next to a military green duffel bag in a basement, the money that had been placed there by a man who left it for a woman named Angela, who never got to use it. He thought about what he would say to her if he could say anything. He thought about February 6th and all the previous versions of it, and this one, which was the worst February 6th in terms of where he was physically, and the best one in terms of what he was carrying inside him. And the specific contradiction of those two facts existing simultaneously in the same body, sitting in a recliner in a soundproofed house that looked abandoned from every angle that mattered. Outside, the street continued its business. The movie played to an audience of one who was not watching, and Joshua sat with his birthday the way he had always sat with it, alone, except that this time, the aloneness was different from every previous version of it, because this time there was someone specific to be alone from. Jackie's house in the early hours of the morning had the specific quality of a house that had been worried in. She had not intended to fall asleep on the couch, had intended to stay awake until Reeves came back, had intended to be sitting upright and fully conscious when he walked through the door, so that he would understand immediately, from the specific quality of her presence, that waiting up for someone who had taken a car that didn't belong to him and driven it somewhere without telling her Where was not something she was going to do quietly or without consequence. She had fallen asleep somewhere around 3 in the morning. And the blanket covering her was not one she had gotten herself. She understood this immediately upon waking. It was the blanket from the guest room, the one she had laid across the foot of the bed for Reeves. She understood what this meant. She understood that he had come in and found her on the couch and covered her before going to bed, that he had done this quietly and without waking her, and that this small gesture was not going to be sufficient to address the situation, but was the kind of thing that a man does when he has done something he knows was wrong and does not yet know how to begin saying so. She got up, went to the guest room. The door was open. Inside, Reeves lay in the bed fully dressed, the specific evidence of a man who had come home exhausted enough that removing his clothes had not seemed worth the effort. His shoes still on, lying on top of the covers with the particular stillness of someone who had fallen deeply and immediately asleep the moment he was horizontal. Jackie stood in the doorway and looked at him. Then she walked to the side of the bed. She kicked off her house shoe, and she began hitting him on the thigh with it in the specific rhythmic insistence of a woman who had been awake worrying and had determined that the worry was going to be distributed more equitably between the two parties responsible for its existence. She hit him again, and again, and again. Each hit carrying the specific weight of every hour she had spent on that couch. The worry, the waiting, the specific particular anguish of caring about someone who has a habit of going places without telling you where and coming back looking like they've been through something they aren't ready to describe. Reeves came awake with the specific disorientation of someone yanked from deep sleep by something unexpected. He blinked, looked up, saw Jackie standing over him with the house shoe and the expression of a woman who had made her feelings about the situation entirely clear through the medium of repeated physical contact. He opened his mouth. She looked at him. He closed his mouth. Then he opened it again. "I'm sorry," he said. Jackie looked at him with the expression she wore when an apology was the correct thing to offer, and was also not yet sufficient to close the matter. Reeves sat up, stood, kissed her cheek with the specific, careful tenderness of a man who understood that tenderness was appropriate here, but that tenderness was not the same as resolution. He hugged her, felt the specific quality of being held back by a woman who is both relieved and not finished being angry, the two things existing simultaneously without contradicting each other. Then he stepped back. "I'm sorry," he said again, looking at her directly, meaning it in the specific way that men who rarely apologize mean it when they finally do. Not as a formula or a social transaction, but as a genuine acknowledgement that something was owed, and this was the beginning of paying it. Jackie looked at him. He walked out of the guest room and down the hall toward the bathroom, his footsteps the specific sound of a man giving a woman the room she needed, without being asked to give it. Jackie stood in the guest room alone. She sat down on the edge of the bed he had slept in fully dressed. The bed she had made for him, with the specific care she brought to making a space for someone she wanted to be comfortable. She sat there with her house shoe in her hand, and the room held everything she hadn't said yet, with the patient, specific quiet of a room that understood there was more coming and was in no hurry.